So here's an impertinent but loving question. What happens when you bring two very different but very Austrian legal scholars together to explain why one of their basic constitutional doctrines is named after a gigantic rock? The magic of video makes it possible, even when the scholars are 200 miles apart. So here are a few minutes about a legal method with a really long Germanic name, Versteinerungstheorie. Break it down. Versteinerungstheorie. In English, with about 20% fewer letters, that translates as the N-stoning theory. This is Iris. She's originally from Graz, and she works there now, but we met when she was a student in Salzburg. Generally, she's a troublemaker. So we went for a hike near St. Gilgen, about 30 miles east of town. She and her Irish beau Gavin wanted to show me a place called the Devil's Gorge.
They came to us later.
That's Gavin in red holding a reflector. Thanks, man.
Does this place speak to you as an Austrian in some way?
Oh yes, it does. Certainly it does. It reminds me because my parents have a hut in the mountains, and next to this hut there are also those gigantic rocks. And they're very similar to the boulders you can find around here with the moss on them. And yeah, it has a feeling of solitude and peace to them.
This is Alexander. He's one of the most distinguished legal philosophers in the country. He spent the last decade teaching in Iowa, but he's just returned to Vienna. So, of course, we met in a coffee shop. I think I'm still recovering from all the caffeine, but Alexander, well, he's Viennese.
I'm not only Viennese, but I'm a Döblinger. I'm from the 19th district. And that's a special distinction that's completely undeserved and unearned. Yeah, there's nothing. But this means that you are from a part of Vienna that is particularly pleasant. Because it is so close to the Vienna woods. Yeah, less densely populated. Auf Deutsch, ein Döblinger redet halt ein bisschen nasal, aber nicht so nasal wie die Menschen, die Schönbrunner Deutsch reden. Ja? Das ist übertrieben. Döblinger haben eine feine Zurückhaltung in der Art und Weise, wie sie reden. I love the Austrian landscape and the beauty of Austrian nature. I think it's the mountains, it's the pastures, and it's vineyards. And it has to do with being at home, because I grew up very close to one of the parts of Vienna where wine is grown. So it's on the slopes of the Kahlenberg, Nussberg. This is where wine is grown. And I grew up right in the vicinity of a then already abandoned vineyard. So it is home for me.
Home. And that brought my conversation with both Alexander and Iris to this fascinating doctrine of Austrian constitutional law that's also named after one of the central features of the Austrian landscape and implicates some of the deepest characteristics of Austria as a nation.
This is a principle developed by the Constitutional Court. It's a special method of interpretation of the competence articles in the Austrian Constitution. So in the Austrian Constitution, the competence of legislation and administration is divided between the federal state and the provinces. And to interpret those competence articles, we use mainly the Versteinerungstheorie.
Versteinerungstheorie is something that only a few people are actually privy to. And I must say I'm an outsider in Versteinerungstheorie. And it takes, I think, years of training and initiation. And you need to have a mentor in order to become an insider in the Versteinerungstheorie. There's no mean sense test, nothing that we know from Marshall and the great jurisprudence developed by the United States Supreme Court. No, the idea is when the Constitution was adopted, the competences of the federal government, there's a general clause in favor of the Länder, so the competences of the federal government were petrified. Petrified means that the competences are limited to what was there on the level of ordinary laws at the time of the adoption.
What we do when we use the Versteinerungstheorie is that we look at the time when this competence article came into force, which is for the most competence articles of the Austrian Constitution, the 1st of October 1925.
And ask yourself, what was civil law, what counted as civil law in the Austrian legal system at the time that the Constitution was adopted and the competence for the regulation of civil law was given to the federal government? Look into the legislation. And if you find something on coffee cups in a civil code, it is part of the jurisdiction of the federal government to regulate coffee cups. Yeah? And if you don't find it, it's not. Yeah? And guess what? You won't find it, so therefore it's not.
It's called Versteinerungstheory because it's as if the legal provisions on the constitutional level are set in stone, because we look at them like in a picture taken on the 1st of October 1925 in most of the cases. So it's set in stone. The special thing in the Versteinerungstheory is that the Constitutional Court first and foremost uses a historical method. So we can tell that in this division of competences, there's a strong relation to the past when we use a historical method. And it's also a relation or a bond to a monarchy times.
Right, yeah, I think that's everywhere in Austria, yeah, the act of monarchy, yeah.
So it's an interesting aspect because in this way we are confronted with legal provisions passed maybe 100 years earlier than the Austrian Constitution entered into force. So from a legal scholar point of view, we might go to the library and we might go to this special room in the library that has special conditions that books from 1857 are in the right climate, and we have to look into those books and see what was understood under a certain term at that time in history. And so it links us to our past and to the past legal provisions.
So people who know how to do it, they versteinern den Kompetenzartikel. Ich versteinere das jetzt, yeah? So you go, the process of interpretation is actually called the process of petrification.
It's still not a static picture because the Versteinerungstheorie also is complemented by the so-called intrasystematische Fortentwicklung, which you could translate with intrasystematic development. So to make this set-in-stone picture moving, we use this additional theory. It's an interesting combination of looking back to the past, but still being open to recent developments.
That's the idea. And that's the way of resolving competence allocation in the federal system, by depoliticizing the problem solving. Pure theory of law. There's a judicial methodology that is not political, not moralistic, not sociological. Versteinerungstheory is in a sense a continuation of this quest for the real legal methodology, a methodology of legal reasoning that is peculiarly legal. Ja, Versteinerungstheorie.